Hey patrons, I am finally back from the AMS and oh my goodness, what an amazing trip. It was incredibly busy and I know I wasn't able to get a mobile forecast up for you or even an informal one, but I did get to meet Noir, who is the PI on Parker Solar Probe. He replaced Nikki Fox and he gave us some wonderful talks, but we weren't able to take pictures in. So I'm not able to show that stuff because the data is still too raw and they're still trying to get a kind of their handle on how exactly to disseminate it and what is really science quality. But I did grab him after he gave his talk and we chatted a little bit and I said, hey, do you want to do a cameo on one of my forecasts? Would that be cool? And he's like, sure, I'd love your forecast. Yeah, let's do it. So we had a little impromptu interview after his talk. We chatted a little bit about the data and how it's going to change some of our views of what the solar wind really is like. And he gave us some insights into how the spacecraft is doing, which means we might actually be able to have solar probe around for even longer than we anticipated. So that's good. Part of that's going to be in the forecast. On top of that, I got to talk to Dolores who's a good friend of mine. She put out that amazing paper in Space Weather just recently on the Carrington class event from 1972 that they exploded a bunch of mines. All that information's been declassified, so I'll talk about that. I have her charts too. And then on top of that, we have Mike Cook. You know him, Space Weather Mike. He has been a big proponent of Aurorasaurus. He also works now with the Air Force doing space weather forecasting for the 557th, and I got him to chat a little bit about some of his feelings on how things were going at the AMS, and also I wanted to get his idea on what he thought about the space weather community and how it's growing. So all of these things will be coming out here in the next month. On Patreon, I will be sure to I'll be sure to let you know when these little posts will be coming out, and the patrons, of course, will get the biggest show. But we will also have some of that stuff in the forecast. But I tell you, all the behind the scenes stuff, I'm going to let you guys see a bunch of craziness. Plus, we've got Scott McIntosh, some of his talks I've been blown away by recently, talking about the sun as a system. So I'll go into some of that, probably in the mini courses. And there have been a few other talks, some wonderful people there that I've been able to chat with. So all of this stuff is going to be coming up on Patreon. So thank you for being patient with me, but man, is it going to be worth it. We're going to have a lot of fun this month talking about all the new stuff that's going on. So let me now switch gears and get to an informal forecast. I have a mini course I've got to give tomorrow to all of you guys regarding the whole CME phenomena. So I'm actually furiously trying to finish the charts there. So I won't get a formal forecast done until we get that out of the way. I want to make sure I do a good job on that mini course tomorrow. But meanwhile, I will give you a little informal forecast so that anybody who really is wondering about what's going on with the sun right now and with this kind of strange coronal hole, little tiny bits and pieces of a coronal hole that we're seeing, I want to make sure you guys know what that is and have, understand why the space weather is doing what it's doing. So this is the front side of the sun. This is my favorite, as you guys probably know by now. This is my favorite software package called HelioViewer, and you see the coronal field lines sticking out. This gives us that coronal field model overlay that we don't typically get looking at movies on the sun, unless you've got this package software. But this is free, so you can definitely download it if you want to. The reason why the magnetic field is so important when it comes to coronal holes is because we get to see what direction the foot points are, what direction the magnetic field is pointing either in or out of the coronal hole areas where the fast wind is coming from. And the first thing I wanted to let you know is you can see that there's a lot of, it's like a patchwork quilt. There's just a few tiny holes here and there, but not a lot when it comes to coherency. So what this means, and it's scattered, you notice it's scattered over a very large part of the disk right now. So what this means is, well, we'll get some pockets of fast wind and then it'll go away. And then we'll get more pockets of fast wind and then it'll go away. And as soon as something starts, it'll go away again. And that's kind of a problem for us when it comes to actually doing predictions, because we say, well, yeah, it could jump up to minor storm conditions at high latitudes and maybe even active conditions at low latitudes or mid latitudes, but how long is it going to last? Will you get aurora It's kind of hard to say, simply because the pockets of fast wind we get from these are just so small, and we're getting some influence from the polar coronal holes, but it's hard to know really where it's, how much Earth is actually going to see. And it's going to be like this easily over the next 5 days or so, which means at high latitudes you will get a chance for aurora if you are paying attention, but expect it to go away as soon as it comes. Expect to look at the AE index in order to get any idea of what the substorming is doing, because all this is going to do is rattle the field a little bit at Earth. It's not really going to create a big geomagnetic storm. So we're just going to have to kind of deal with little bits of substorms popping on and popping off. And that is going to continue easily, like I said, for the next 5 days. But we do, if I rotate this guy around a little bit so we can see stereo. As a matter of fact, let me make sure stereo is on here. Let me turn stereo on. Okay, now stereo is this kind of greenish yellow overlay. So here's stereo's view back from January 7th. And you can see as I'll continue rotating this way, start losing the image there. But right here, believe it or not, as it rotates back into view, right here, that is the coronal hole that we've been doing dances with since August. It looks like it's finally beginning to break down, and I'll show you in another more recent view of stereo, because these images stop at the 8th, I believe. Stereo, you see right here, the 8th. So they're a little bit out of time. It gets stuck right at the end of the 8th. So the last image for the green is a few days old, and it just kind of continues rotating with the software package, so you can at least get an idea of what that coronal hole looked like back then. I will then show in just a moment, I'll show the more updated pictures from the beacon data, which is the lower resolution data, but it gives us a better idea of how this coronal hole is evolving. And I'll show you a little bit more insight as to what we're going to be seeing and how much this region is changing right now. But what you do notice is that, see, these are red foot points. We still have the same kind of magnetic configuration that we've had in all of the other cycles or rotations that we've seen with this coronal hole. So yes, this coronal hole could still be a solar storm producer. It is shrinking, it's changing shape. It looks like it may be finally beginning to kind of close and collapse. So it may not pop us up to storm levels. It may only get us to maybe active conditions, but it will give us a good show at high latitudes. This guy is going to be rotating into Earth view literally in the next couple days. Here's the line where Earth view is. And so you can see as we got close to about the 11th, it's within a day or so when this thing rotates back here. It's within a day of coming onto the east limb from Earth view, which is on this side of that line. See, it's getting close. So expect to see this in the next couple days. We'll start getting a better look at it to see whether or not, it's still got a lot, the coronal hole is still well formed or not. But prior to that, it's going to be a little hard to make predictions. But it is at least still there, and we should get something. Oh, great, I've got trucks that are coming in. I don't know if you guys hear all that noise. And then one other thing I wanted to mention, as a matter of fact, I'll go ahead and take off the model field, if it lets me. And I'll take off stereo for the moment, just so I know a couple of you have been watching this region. It did launch a little small mini solar storm, and then this part of this region kind of died a little bit. It's hard to tell if that actually even lifted off of the sun. We really didn't see much when it came to stereo. So even though we thought that this might be maybe close to a Stellium or at least a weak one, don't really expect that we're going to be seeing anything. That was launched back on the 9th or so. That was launched recently. That was launched around the 10th, I believe. Let me watch the dates when it was launched. Here they come. It's the 9th. And I'm watching the numbers over here when that fires. Bam, right there. It was the 10th. Late on the 10th. So could that still be coming towards Earth if any of that material did escape? Yes, it could be. I seriously doubt it's going to impact Earth in any great degree. So I wouldn't worry about it too much in terms of it being a solar storm. But yes, we have noticed that. Now, let me go ahead. I'm going to stop this if I can. Whoops, let me blow that. That works, doesn't it? Let me zoom back out. Oh, I love trackpads. They end up making things look very strange sometimes. All I was trying to do was slide that up so I could stop it. Okay, now here we go. So now what I want to show you is stereo A. And what we are going to be looking at is just a time from essentially when this starts over here. It'll start again on the 8th. And this is the new data that you did not see in HelioViewer. That is the region right there. That's the coronal hole. But look at this region up in here. See this? This is that finger where that polar coronal hole kind of reaches down. And as soon as it restarts again, come on, this is all beacon data. So this is just within the last couple days. Do you see this? It looks like either a hole or a filament in this region. And then you'll see a lot of changes. Watch. Ooh. Right there. Looks like it launched something, maybe a stealthy solar storm or something like that. And that launched on the sun's backside, but it also has really changed the configuration of this. Any connectivity that these two might have had, looks like it might have completely erased it. So we're getting that coronal hole completely filling in here. This one now looks like it's completely disconnected from maybe any type of polar connection that it might have had. That will be very interesting to see, because I think that connection, if it's still there, ends up making the fast wind more coherent. If it's completely disconnected, it may not. So we may not have as strong a chance for a solar storm. And so I will be very interested when this thing finally rotates into Earth view to see what we've actually got. So that's that. Now, if I go and take a look at the recurrence of this coronal hole, look at this thing. We started off in August. And we had active conditions. This picture, by the way, is due to Mike Cook. He's been very good about showing the multiple rotations of this particular coronal hole coming back and forth to, or coming back to us time and again. This was on September, and we got a G2 level storm for quite some time, actually. This is when we think there was a stealthy CME somewhere embedded in all of this. Then in October, it came back and it gave us a G1 storm. Then in November, it gave us a G2 storm, just barely, but a decent storming. Then in November, it hardly gave us anything. It was just barely active for a short while, and you could see it was kind of collapsing and filling in, which unfortunately is what it's beginning to look like again. So I'm worried that we may only see something like this. And then in December, believe it or not, we actually did get a little bit more activity from it, despite it continues to being, closing up like this. So I expect this time around we'll see something between these two pictures. That's my guess. And because we are continuing to see it fill in, here it was less connected to the polar area, but here it was too, it seems. So we still got a decent storm, but it's hard to see if we have any connection whatsoever to that polar region, and we'll definitely be looking this time around to see how radically different it is this time. So that's that information. Now, when I go to the KP index, this is the one I'm looking at. This is the planetary index. You can see the last time we actually had, let me try to slide this up a little. I can't. I was hoping I could. There we go. The last time we actually had storm levels or reached storms levels was back around January 5th. And that didn't last, lasted for about a day or so. Since then, we've been at unsettled conditions and then almost quiet conditions. And then we popped up just this past day, just today, we've popped up to active conditions for a fleeting moment. This is what I'm talking about when it comes to these active, these periods of fast solar wind, or some weird thing happens in the solar wind and you get just a momentary pop and then it's gone as fast as it starts. And that's kind of frustrating for space weather forecasters, because these types of things are extremely short-lived and we just don't know where they're going to happen because we don't know the magnetic field that well. And if I go to the planetary index, here's a blow-up of that. Sure enough, it was just 1 3-hour pop, where everything else was essentially sitting at quiet conditions. So expect the forecast, the 5-day outlooks to look a little strange. When we go to the magnetometer data, and this is GOES magnetometer, you can see these little tiny pops like this one right here. This was when the KP index went to an active condition for just a short while. You can see that big deviation right there. You should be seeing something that's kind of a smooth up and down, up and down. You can see there was another one right there, but it didn't go as deep to cause it to jump up to active conditions. But this is what we're talking about, these little deviations that don't last for very long, but sure wreak havoc when it comes to seeing the KP index go. But that doesn't mean for you mid-latitude aurora photographers that you're going to be expecting to see a lot of aurora at mid-latitudes. So just be careful. But it does mean that AE index is probably the way to go when it comes to substorms, especially at high latitudes. You guys will get a much better chance of seeing sustained aurora. Now, when it comes to the X-ray flux, oof, we are flatlined again, folks. There's just nothing going on. We are spotless right now. We had that 2732 region that lived for a little while, but it died off. It gave us a couple C-class flares, and then it died off and rotated to the sun's west limb, behind the sun's west limb. And now we're completely back to spotless, and we're going to be sitting like this for quite some time. The solar flux is back down into the high 60s, I believe, and that's, it's going to last like that for a little while. So let me switch now to the 5-day. So here's the 5-day that we've got right now. I will be updating this in, and I got a little outline here, sorry about that. I will be updating this when I do the official forecast. But right now we're expecting unsettled conditions at high latitudes with about a 25% chance of a minor storm, which will drop down a little bit and then pick up again, and then drop down and then pick up. It's just the best we can do right now. At mid-latitudes, we're expecting basically unsettled conditions. Maybe around the 13th, we'll see another pop to active conditions like we did today. And then again, maybe around the 15th. It's kind of hard to say. I could easily take these and shift them over one day. It's very, very sporadic. Does this mean we'll see aurora at mid-latitudes? Maybe if you're lucky for, an eye blink. So don't get too excited, aurora photographers down here at mid-latitudes. What it does mean, however, is that amateur radio should have a nice boost. I know we're sitting low when it comes to the X-ray flux, and so these really mild storms can very often boost the ionization in the upper atmosphere and really kind of boost the solar flux, or not solar flux, but boost the radio propagation for you. So that will translate even to the day side just a little bit, but night side propagation should be pretty good. And for GPS operators, your low latitude, even at nighttime, should be good as well. Again, these solar storms that are really quite kind of mild like this, have a tendency to boost tend to stabilize the upper atmosphere. So it makes it drops the level of scintillation in your GPS signals. So switching to your solar flare and particle radiation storm outlook, again, we're sitting at a spotless sun. We're sitting with solar flux hovering around 69. It may drop to 68 as this other plage region rotates, kind of the dying bright region rotates to the sun's backside, but it'll probably hover somewhere around this area. And of course, we still are, I have been checking, even though this doesn't change, I do check all the time, and we are still at a moderate level for radiation dose. For prenatal, that's what PN stands for, prenatal passengers and frequent flyers, especially those that fly above 40 degrees latitude and above 35,000 feet, or around 11,000 kilometers. And for the air crew, if you guys are flying over 800 hours annually, it's a big deal. So that's pretty much it, I believe, when it comes to the forecast. And maybe, you know what, let's see if I have it. If I have it up, I might show you something interesting. Yes, for those of you who just want wanted the forecast, that's pretty much it. For you, no, I don't want this PowerPoint. I have a different PowerPoint. I was going to look for, there it is. Look at this PowerPoint, guys. This is, come on. This is Dolores Knipp's PowerPoint. She actually gave me her slides. Can you believe it? What a sweetheart she was. So this is the PowerPoint that she presented at the AMS. And I will make this available to patrons if you guys want part of it. It may need some explanation. Now all of this is going to be available at the AMS with her recording over it, so you can actually hear what she actually said when she was giving the talk. But some of this information might indeed show up in a mini course sometime when we're talking about maybe coronal mass ejections and what Carrington events can do. And what's really cool is that if you've seen her space weather paper, there's only a few figures in there, but in this paper, there's actually a little bit of a movie, there's This is one of the figures I really wanted to show you. This is not in her paper, and this one is, and it shows the sunspot and the active region that was responsible for this. You can see how incredibly intense it was. But here's the cool thing, is that it actually shows it evolving in time. And you can get this from the Big Bear Solar Observatory and in Zurin and Tanaka's paper back in 1973. So it is in the archives, but you can see white and black represent opposite magnetic polarities. And oh my goodness, look at how intense this is and how much it evolved over this period of time. This thing let off one of the first recorded gamma ray bursts that we've ever seen from the sun. There's all sorts of really cool stuff in this talk. As well as looking at some of the filament that let loose. I believe this filament was part of what was responsible for the Carrington class event that we saw at Earth that detonated all those mines. So there is just a ton of information here. She's even got notes in the margin. And check this one out. This is the slide I want you to see as well. The solar radiation storm from this event was so intense, it created an ozone hole. I had never even knew that was even possible. It created a hole in our ozone. And this is Regan et al. And JGR 1981. So this has been reported on, and we can get copies of this. So I will eventually be going over this when I have a chance to review some of this material too. So just some amazing things going on at the AMS that go far beyond what we ever anticipated, and I'm going to absolutely share it all with you, with all you patrons. So comment. Let me know what's most interesting to you, and I will get on it. And believe it or not, I'm just thrilled to be able to do all this. So hopefully you'll forgive me for not having the forecasts up recently, because I was just, as you can tell, inundated with such amazing stuff. And I'm sure I'm going to make it up to you, I promise.